Hey folks, Tony Lockhart here. We're back in the studio. It is the 2nd of April 2019. So it's been a while. I've been really busy with work and a bunch of other side projects and things like that, but I'm finally going to get back into the swing of making videos. And really what I want to do is to document the process. So tonight what I'm doing is setting up a bunch of inventory for a craft show that I'm going to be working in. And the craft show is in South Pasadena. It's going to be on the 27th of April. Anyways, I've got an inventory of a bunch of different things over here. Probably got a good 60, 70 cups and things like that. So anyways, what I've done is just taken a quick inventory. Got some B-mix, or not B-mix. I've got some B3 mugs. Got a bunch of these speckled buff mugs. Tons of these guys right here. It's a speckled buff thumb cup, so there's like a thumb rest that's integrated into it. Got small ones. I've got large ones as well. Got these tiny little kid mugs, kind of like espresso cups. Regular tumblers, it's kind of like a pint glass. And then more thumb cups in Moroccan sand, that's a cinnamon color. And I've also got a B-mix. I've also got a couple one-offs and custom orders. And if you look over there on the bottom, we got a bunch of those different teapots. Got a couple little tiny things over here that my kids have made. I made the one that's kind of in the shape of a cone. And then here's like a better look of the inventory. Still have a ton of stuff to make. A bunch of lidded jars, a bunch of bowls and things like that. I probably have about 2 more firings this April. Here's the rest of the studio. So I have some lidded jars that I'm working on right there. Sorry, just knocked the tripod around a bit. Those need to be trimmed. They're still, they're getting to a leather hard stage. In that box right there at the bottom, I've got a bunch of B-mix mugs. But, let's do some glazing tonight. Okay, so here's the setup. Basically got a wire whisk that I'm going to use to stir up the glaze to make sure it doesn't settle too much. Got a sponge to kind of clean off the vessels. Got a pouring container right here. And in this pouring container with the spout, I'll be able to pour this into the cups and then like fill it back up again. And then lastly, here's my list. So it's just basically everything I have. Got some B3 mugs, some SB mugs. Then I've got a bunch of thumb cups. So I've got small and large. Tumblers are just basically pint glasses. I've got these little tiny mugs as well. So here we go. So first one on the list, it says 3 white B3 mugs. So let's get going on that. Good idea to check for inconsistencies when you're going to do this. And then what I'll do is pour this glaze right inside. And what I'm going to try to do is swish it around a bit and I'll pour it back right in. You try to do it nice and easy, not too turbulent. And then what I'll do is before it gets too dry, I'll do a single dip. And then I'll pull it out. And I'll kind of swish it around. There's a little mosquito flying around. Kind of swish it around like this to make sure I don't get too much of the glaze pooling at the top. You sometimes give it a little shake, and that's it. It's kind of dry to the touch, but it still has a little bit of dampness to it. So what I'll do is tomorrow, once this is properly dry, I'll go back in and I'll dip it at the bottom, and then I'll clean that lip off as well, and it should be good to go. By doing that, I'm gonna have like an excess of glaze around the belly, so that's kind of what I want for some of these. So what'll happen is it will look a lot whiter, and this will be like a dark white, and you can see some of the brown glaze through it, or the brown clay. So let's just do a couple more. So here's a nice one. So again, I like to check for imperfections. Just make sure there's nothing wrong in the inside. It's a good time to make sure there are no little scraps. If you want to sand your pottery, you could do that. And then nice and quick, give it a good dip. And then swirl it around. This will be the same process with the other ones as well. So when I switch up and I go to a different shape item, same type of thing. So teaching visual arts in a high school is very similar to a lot of the training and teaching that I've had, learning pottery. So a lot of the stuff I do is on my own, but then there's a lot of additional stuff that I do by reading and finding things online. So it looks like we have speckled buff mugs. It looks like I have 8 of them. I need 2 whites. So go. Look for the white ones. This looks like this one. So anyways, back to that ramble I was saying about teaching. I tell a lot of my students, like, you just really gotta practice and you gotta fail. You just gotta make mistakes. But I think the number one thing that has helped me as a visual artist has been to just practice, and to try and to fail. It's like one of the best things that I could recommend. Okay, so this is a B mix, or a speckled buff mug. So what I did was to expose a little bit of that clay body on the bottom, and then of course I've got it poured on the inside. And then what I'll do is I'll go back. There's a little bit of overspill right there. I'll go back and clean that off tomorrow when this is properly dried. So back on that point with thorough practice, when I got into pottery and it was just a hobby, it was pretty easy to just take a class at a community college and to just figure out what to do with all this stuff. Because, most of it was garbage. I did a really poor job at it because I hadn't practiced. But it's only when I decided to invest in, building my own studio at my home that I realized I need to get rid of all this stuff. What am I gonna do with all these cups, these mugs and things like that? So I think it's interesting to consider how to take your pottery as a hobby and then level it up. because when you finally force yourself to make 8 mugs or 10 mugs or 30 mugs, that's when you learn, and that's when you become really proficient at the practice of doing things. And you know, a lot of that is in line with what I tell my students. I still feel like I'm learning on a daily basis, and I think that's why this pottery stuff is so fun for me. Just look at that. What a crazy material. So what I need now is I need 12 of these guys. Probably switch it up after this one, get a different angle. This little swish around, with a bit of a shake. Tell you, it's really convenient to have the design like this, because I just kind of clean off the bottom, give it a flat surface, and then if I dip at an angle, I don't really need to wax or to fuss with any of that. Alright, so we got the change up again. So it looks like I have 3 of those SB mugs, maybe 2. So time to continue. Looks pretty good. Nice quiet pour, dump it right back in here, and then just get ready to drop it right in. So there she is. Bit of over drip right there. You can see the shadow being cast. There's that little thumbprint. Definitely nice cast shadow. I don't know if you can catch it from the inside. A little bit of a dent. You can see it in the top corner. Alright, so I gotta do 12 of these. A little tiny piece of clay. One of the things you got to be careful with touching your pottery when doing this type of work is you want to wear gloves over your hands, unlike the way I'm doing. I actually don't mind if the glaze falls apart and does not stick to the surface, but I know a lot of people want their pottery to be perfect. So if you want to make sure that the glaze adheres properly, you don't want to introduce any oils or any type of, contamination to this porous surface, because then the glaze is not going to be able to stick to it. Also, in doing this, you want to be very quick with the application. You can't really fuss around and pour the inside and then just let it sit for 20 minutes. Because the moisture from the glaze from inside this container, the moisture is going to really collect into the body of your cups, and then you're done for. If there's too much moisture and then you do an exterior dip, then what will happen is it's going to start to chip or flake off, because when I dip this in right now, there's liquid from the inside of the bucket, and that liquid that's inside is going to absorb into the ware as well from the other side. So it's in this constant state of equilibration, kind of like all the other stuff on our planet. But you need that balance to occur. So if you dip them at the same time, you're good to go. If that's not the case, you should just come back on the following day and dip the outside. One of the things that I really like about the pottery is that, you know, in going into this type of production mode, it's really fun to make every single one of the pots unique. So I don't really like when everything's exactly the same. It's very easy to set up a gauge or some kind of a tool to measure to get everything to be identical, but it's kind of boring to me. I really enjoy how every single one of these is different. And I really go out of my way to try to leave, little hints inside that suggest like, oh, somebody made this. This was not made by a machine. It was a handmade artisan product that somebody cares about. They made it. Really, I think that's the aspect of pottery that I enjoy the most. I really, really like the idea that, this object, which is beautiful, it also serves and it has a function as well. And there's a lot of thought that goes behind the function. And then of course, with that thought behind the function, you have to practice a lot, and there's a lot of considerations that you don't see. I just, knocked this out. Probably took me a couple minutes to make it while I was on the pottery wheel. But I had to make about 100 of these before I got to that point. And that very first one that I made, it didn't take 2 minutes. It probably took 10 or 15 minutes to try to throw the first one. Running out. So it looks like I'm running out of glaze, one of these bigger ones. So what I'll do is do a twist. All right, we're looking good. We have a bunch of these thumb cups, some of those mugs done up, and we've got a handful of extra things to continue. Hey, thanks for taking the time to watch. I really appreciate it.